All right, welcome to another edition of Maverick University. We're going to continue on with Brother Garry Way and Richard Way, father-son in the ministry. And if you want to check out the previous video, we talked about relationships and rules and how love is spelled T-I-M-E. You can check out the previous video in the description. There'll be a link there where you can get to that video. We're going to continue our conversation with some other topics we were talking about before we started. Consistency and balance in the Christian home and how that relates to child rearing. So talk to me about just the concept of balance and what that means in a home life.
I think the number one thing that I've seen, and again, I've been in ministry now for, I guess, 58 years, from the time I was a preacher's kid till now, and met thousands of pastors and pastors' wives and pastors' families. And when I say inconsistency, I'm not always talking about maybe inconsistency in doctrine, but sometimes they're at church, they're one type person, at home they're another type person. At church they might be outgoing and friendly, then they come home and they're withdrawn, or they're abrupt. They'll have extra patience at church but no patience at home. And I would see this in the interaction, and so and as a young man, I thought, I've got to maintain a balance in my life. If I want to have a spiritual impact on my children, there's got to be some consistency. There has to be a balance in there. I felt like, and again, this is an observation, not a criticism, but I felt like that my father, when he pastored, he would spend more time with church people and the church activities than he would with his family. So I felt he was imbalanced in that area. So I determined as a young pastor with young children that I wanted to have a balance. I wanted to spend time with my family, obviously, but I wanted to spend time with the church. And then I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to be the same person no matter where you saw me, no matter what time of day, no matter what the activity was. I was going to be the same person. I did not want any inconsistency in my life. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to balance, the spiritual balance. I wasn't going to spend 8 hours soul winning and 8 minutes with my family, but I might spend an hour and a half or 2 hours on Thursday night soul winning, and then Richard have a ball game on Friday night for an hour and a half. I wanted to keep a balance in there because I felt like I needed that to get the hearts of my children to have an impact on them.
Brother Richard, are there some areas that you find it's a challenge as a pastor to balance things out?
I do, but balance for me is maybe a different take than him. One thing that I learned from my parents is, we can participate in things we enjoy, and also the ministry.
Okay.
A lot of parents, sports are wicked, sports are sinful, and
okay.
You know what I'm saying? And while I believe they can take you out of church and they can take your focus off things, that doesn't make them wicked or sinful because you participate in them. And I think one thing my parents were able to teach is, hey, we can play a basketball game and we can go to church, but they're not going to conflict because we know the Lord comes first. Church always comes first. I remember a particular story. I was about 14. I was on an all-star select baseball team, and it happened to be on a Wednesday night game, and it was about an hour and a half away. And I was a starting first baseman, probably batting fourth or fifth, pretty important role on the baseball team. But the game started at 6. And so what we did, we got there, and my dad had told the coach, he said, look, we're leaving at 6:45. And then the coach was like, what in the world? Why? Where are you going? He's like, well, we have church. And like, you're going to take your son out of a baseball game to go to church? Well, yeah. And, it happened to be where they didn't conflict. I was able to participate in the game, sure. But we also went to church. We weren't going to miss church for any activity. Didn't matter, we love sports, and that was just one of the hobbies that we did. But it was never a conflict of interest. We can do this, and we can be in ministry because we can find a balance there. Sure. I mentioned earlier in our previous discussions that Brother Coral says in one of his books that balance always does good and never does damage. And pastoring now, I can see where a lot of damage has been done not only in pastors' homes, but in homes in general, because there wasn't a proper balance, whether it was, as he described balance, or, as I describe balance. We have to find some common ground where living life to the fullest is great, and also serving the Lord is great. And we can understand both, and they don't have to conflict. We can do both, but you got to find a balance there of, and each family's different, each life is different, and so it's a struggle, and obviously there are times, for instance, a couple weeks ago, we had Hurricane Laura that came through Lake Charles, and we were wanting to take some supplies and try to encourage some preachers, and so one morning I left at 5 a.m. and didn't get home till after 6, and you'd driven 500-600 miles, long day.
Sure.
When we get home, that was, to me, that was ministry, needed to be done. But when you get home, hey, still have family.
You still have to have something in the reserve.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's finding that balance of saying, hey, I need to do this. I have to do this, and we can do it all. We can give everything we have to the ministry. We can give everything I have to our wife. Give everything we have to our kids, and find a balance there where nobody's feeling neglected, because that's a vital role. As a pastor, because you don't want your church to feel neglected, you don't want your wife to feel neglected, you don't want your kids to feel neglected, and if you don't find a proper balance, I feel like that happens many times. They feel neglected because it is a struggle to find that balance.
I think it's good to have a frank conversation with family and just say, hey, this is Thursday night, this is the night I go out and it's church soul winning night, right. And so don't expect me home until this time. And if that's the understanding, but there better be an understanding that also Friday night is I'm home and we're doing something.
Absolutely.
And that's important. And obviously you have that schedule set up, and things try to interfere with it.
And with every relationship, communication is key. I mean, that's across the board. If you're not communicating your desires and your objectives to the church, to your wife, to your kids, it definitely can cause conflict and struggle in the pastor's home.
Your story about the baseball game kind of highlights a couple things. Obviously, it highlights that you can have church activities. Right. It highlights you can have non-church activities. Yes. But it also gives the opportunity to teach that the Lord's activities trump every other diversion that's out there. And so you have that balance, and then you learn priorities at the same time.
Yeah, and also, you could look at it a different light that, hey, these people are serious about the Lord. Because that's not very common today for somebody.
Yeah, it turns my head.
To participate in sports, but yet when you get to a certain point, hey, we're leaving at 6:45 because we have church. A lot of folks, we're not going to play sports because of church, and to each his own. It's all about finding a balance for your life. But that's one thing that I was taught is you can have this, but this comes first.
Well, when we left the game, the timing was perfect. He was playing first base, and the shortstop, third baseman, threw it to first base for the third out. And I was coaching third base, and so when the out's made, I walk across the field. Richard and I are walking into the first base dugout. Well, we walk right on out, and we're walking by the bleachers, and people are saying, "Where are you going?" I said, "It's church time." "You're going to church tonight?" "Yeah, it's Wednesday night. We're going to church." They were incredulous that we were leaving that ball game and walking out to go to church. But on the other hand, what a message we sent to our community that said, "Hey, this is somebody who's taking a stand." And a year or two after that, I became the president of the baseball program. Well, they were having their board meetings on Wednesday night. I said, "No, we're changing that. We're going to have it on Tuesday night." "Well, Tuesday night," I said, "Hey, I'm not going to be here on Wednesday night. That's church night." So I did that for 5 years. Well, when Richard finally got out of baseball at 16, when I told him, I said, "Okay, I'm done. I've been in this for a long time." The first thing they did was change it back to Wednesday night. And listen, the guy said, "It's only church." And I said, "That's your problem. To you, it's only church. To me, it's a priority."
Yeah.
But the community understood that because we took a stand. And that's a highlight to me, to be able to let my community know that this is one guy who was going to be consistent in what we did.
So let's get down to like nuts and bolts here with consistency. Some things done on purpose to try to turn out godly children to try to be consistent? What were some things that maybe you caught yourself in some ways, like I need to correct that, and we need what were some family discussions that this night is we're doing some ministry, some things on this night, but this night is how did a weekly schedule typically run?
Well, we had our church schedule, so we knew
Yes, sir.
church on Sunday, and then we had church on Wednesday, and we had soul winning on Thursday nights, at 7 o'clock till, depending on the time of year. And then on Saturday morning had bus visitation and Sunday school classes, and then another kind of soul winning follow-up time on Saturday. So that was set. And so that was the top priority schedule. And then so when it came time for other activities, we had to do things on purpose and say, okay, we don't plan anything on Thursday nights because that's soul winning. We don't plan anything on Saturday mornings, and we usually started it with a breakfast or something like that at 8 or 8:30 and leave at 9 or 9:30 and be done around noon or 1 o'clock around lunchtime. So that was pretty much set in stone, and so that was the consistency, that was the schedule.
Yeah.
That we didn't plan anything. And so when somebody would call and say, "Hey, can y'all come on Thursday?" No, we have church, and so the question was never asked, "Are we going to soul winning?" Mm-hmm. It was always, we are going. They never had to ask, are we?
Yeah.
It was set.
You didn't have to ask, do we have a conflict
That
would conflict with soul winning? Right. There are no conflicts with soul winning.
Or the more funny one was that, a lot of churches began to do this. It was like Richard would say, do I have to wear a tie tonight? I said, yes. Until he quit asking. You just wear the tie every service until I tell you otherwise. But that's the consistency. And there was times, that you're talking about things we do on purpose. I have a more vocal, more, caustic leadership sometimes, and I would have to back up. And I remember one time my wife rebuked me privately, but I looked at our daughter and I said, quit acting like a kid. And my wife pulled me off the side and she said, Gary, she is a kid. And so it was a rebuke to say, hey, you need to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are some things that were done on purpose. Thank goodness for a godly wife who saw that the statement I had made to a child when if she'd have been 20, it'd been different, but I think she was 12. Quit acting like a kid. Well, she is a kid.
Sometimes it takes an outside
exactly.
look to see some things.
That's a lot of times I would have to tone things down, and my wife was always the reminder. She'd say, you need to tone it down. Because my style is, push. And so I had to, now Richard he got his mother's traits. He's much more calm, and the thing that I love about him is when he was a kid growing up, I would look at him and I would say, stop, don't do that. And, with a loud voice, he will motion his son over there and he'll whisper in his ear. And he'll say the same thing that I probably said out loud, but he learned a more gentler approach.
Sure.
So, that's an on-purpose thing.
Yeah.
That's something you have to learn to do. And so he's learned to do that he saw my mistakes and has made a correction. And I look at that and I go, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
But he did. And so I watch him with his kids and I see some things that he learned. He probably learned a lot of things what not to do.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, we learn the good, the bad, the ugly.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Brother Richard, for you and your family, obviously your kids are still young, and you can't call yourself a parenting success just yet. But what are some things that you're trying to do on purpose? What's your schedule with your ministry and your personal lives, and keeping that balance?
Yeah, I think it's just everybody's different. One thing that I do is I pick and choose what I do. Mm-hmm. I try not to overextend myself, because if things need to be done, there are people in the church who can do them, and then I can do them. But if I can find someone, hey, why don't you pray about taking this on as a ministry? Why don't you pray about helping here? And I think a struggle a lot of pastors have is they have a lot of irons in the fire, as the saying is, and they overextend themselves, and then the family structure struggles because of overextension. And so that's one thing that I do. And some folks have asked me, well, hey, why don't you do this? I was like, well,
I'm full.
yeah. One of my priorities is my family. Yeah. And if I were to do this, then, it would cause me to struggle with my relationship with my kids.
Sure.
And, one thing being a third generation preacher, but, even fourth generation Christian, is, I feel like we need to raise the bar, raise the level, particularly with, family devotions and family altar. I was thinking about, we always hear preaching on how important the Word of God is, and I know a lot of families do family devotions and read the Bible, and there's really not a wrong way to do it. I mean,
just as long as you're opening
it's
the book.
Important. But I figured it out that if from the time your child was born until they graduate, you could, if you just read one chapter a day, read the Bible in just a short time with your entire family, read the Bible completely through. And so we started that, and thankfully we haven't read the Bible through, but I think we've accomplished 6 books of the Bible, and it's not something we do every night, but we have altar time, we have Bible time, and just to show my kids that, look, this is important. This book will change your life, because that's what happened to us. We realized, hey, we can have a real relationship with God, and it doesn't have to be phony. It doesn't have to be a facade. It can be a real relationship, and so often that starts in the home, but many times in the pastor's home, you're hearing your dad preach, and you're hearing your mom teach, and you're singing specials, and you're involved in here, and then you come home, and just at times there's not a lot going on at home. It is absent. Wow. And so that's where I've really tried to emphasize in my home is, hey, us getting together every night and praying, and even certain times, a few months ago we were moving, and man, it was just stressful. I mean, it was just, get this box and get that box and do this and do that. I mean, every time you move, it can be stressful. And so I remember that particular moment. I said, y'all come here. And so we just got in the middle of our living room. Man, we just had a family altar right there. Just ask the Lord to help us to be patient with each other and kind and loving, because we preach that from the pulpit. That's the way. Hey, this is the way you need to live. But then oftentimes we come home and that emphasis is lost. And so I feel like as a third generation pastor, man, I can't lose that emphasis just because your grandfather and your great grandfather were pastors doesn't mean you're going to live for God and serve God. This has to be done on purpose. This is a priority. And so I think that's one thing that my wife and I work together and strive for is to help our kids develop a real relationship with God through a family devotion, family altar time is per se.
You lead in church, you're leading in this public ministry, and if you're not careful, you can be tempted to not lead spiritually at home, just assuming that you're getting the spiritual at church. It's kind of like what we say here at Providence Baptist College to our college students. You're in Bible class, you're in chapel 5 days a week, you're soloing, you're doing ministry on the weekends, and so obviously, you've got to have your own personal walk with God. Otherwise, it's just
you can't depend on as I've been about. You can't depend on what you hear from chapel or what the reading you get done in class. You can't depend upon that as your walk with God. And same thing in the preacher's home. You can't say, well, my dad's the pastor. I have a walk with God. That's not a real relationship. That's a remedy for trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. We have just a little bit of time. So what are we talked about some things we've done on purpose, to bring balance in the home. But what were some things that just you didn't consciously do, but, raising your kids growing up, or maybe some things you're doing now, it's hard to think of the things you haven't consciously decided to do and actually come up with those in your brain. But were there some things that come to mind that like, wow, that was a pretty smart thing I did I'm glad I did it because I didn't really intend to. It was just, something I'm just glad I did.
Well, we were talking earlier. We had been in Gainesville for about, I guess, 4 or 5, maybe 6 months when we had our first mission conference. Mm-hmm. And so I invited a mission director from an agency there in Dallas, Fort Worth, and him and his wife, and we didn't have any money at that time, and so we went to a local taco place, like a Taco Bell, but just a local homemade place there. And on Thursday nights they had all you could eat tacos and burritos, and so we took them there.
Yeah.
We took them there because we thought that was really neat, because we're saving money. And we got this gentleman there, great guy. He'd actually been an assistant pastor with my dad years before, and so I'd known him since I was a young man, a teenager. And so he's sitting there at the table, and he asked the kids, he said, "Have you ever seen a pine float?" And they go, "Well, no." He goes, "Well, let me show you a pine float." He takes a toothpick, puts it in a glass of water, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. Well, they talked about that for several days, and I thought, okay, he built a relationship with my kids, and I had nothing to do with it, but I saw that little interaction with that pine, mm-hmm. and I guarantee you 10 years later they're still talking about Brother Houston and that pine float.
That's funny.
And so that was I wouldn't say it was an accident, but it was something that was not planned that I saw, and I said, there's a key there. Mm. So then I wanted to expose them to men of God who would have an impact on their life. And so it was, the providence of God, but I didn't know that was going to happen, but then I saw it happen, and I thought, okay, there's a lesson to be learned there.
Yeah.
Let those men of God. And so the greatest thing there, one of the greatest things happened, Dr. Lee Robertson, mm-hmm. I had him come and speak. We'd been in Gainesville about 4 or 5 years. And we just built a new building, and finances were really tight trying to make that payment. And so he came to our home for lunch one day. And after he got through eating lunch, this gentleman who never takes his coat off, he kneels down beside the dining room table, and he puts his hand on one of the children, and he prays for my family. And I thought, wow, Dr. Lee Robertson sitting at my table eating lunch, and then he prays for my children. And I thought that's what that helped me see another time, a few years after the pine float incident, how that men of God could have a very positive impact on my children. Mm-hmm. And that was a memory that I'll never forget for them, that they were young, and I told them later on, you won't appreciate this till you get older, but you were sitting at your dining room table with Dr. Lee Robertson.
That's pretty cool.
It was cool. And so something by accident turned into something on purpose, and for the next however many years, I guess until I quit pastoring, I was always bringing men in who I thought could be help to my children, mm-hmm. and then the latter years of my pastorate to my grandkids.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I learned by accident that turned out to be a tremendous thing.
So that kind of goes along with that saying it takes a village.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So, Brother Richard, anything that you can think of that, man, just happenstance, like, wow, this is really helping my kids, things I didn't really plan on, but just came along, and wow, this is being a benefit, a blessing to my family.
Yeah, I think along with those lines, a lot of things that I do in the ministry, I've implemented that I've learned, from my dad's ministry and other folks' ministries, and that's just, allowing folks to influence your kids, and teaching my kids that you can learn from everyone. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you learn what not to do. Sometimes you learn what to do. And so just taking that opportunity. I know one thing that particularly sticks out in my mind, maybe not completely on the same topic, but is I appreciate the fact that my dad has always been who he is. Mm-hmm. He's never tried to be somebody he's not. And I remember, especially, since I've started pastoring, is, hey, I don't have to be anybody else. I can be who God wants me to be. And that moment when anybody realizes, hey, if the Lord's pleased and honored with my life, and I can be myself, I don't have to worry about what people think or what people say, as long as I'm pleasing the Lord. And it's a great moment in people's lives. And
it's liberating.
Yes, absolutely. And it brings a freedom that you really don't experience until that moment comes where you're like, hey, I can be who God wants me to be, and I can be happy about it, and I can serve the Lord in gladness.
Praise the Lord. Well, thank you guys for joining me.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
the
very much.
conversation, and I hope it's a blessing and a help to you all. If you want to learn more about the PK Conference, we'll put some information in the description down below. You can check that out and make some contact and find out about the nearest and the next PK Conference coming up. So have a good day. Thanks for watching.